Okay, this is your lecture for the week of April 6th, and probably we'll cover the 8th as well. It's a kind of a long chapter, but I think we can get through it in about an hour and 20 minutes. Kind of an interesting chapter. This one's about interpersonal attraction and close relationships. So it's not only your friends, but also your significant others and your extended families. You've probably seen these women on some history channels. They show them on television from time to time. They're Thai mountain women from the Padang tribe. What they try to do is elongate their necks, and of course, as you can see from the lady on the left. She has a very long neck. Now the reality is her neck is the same size as it was before, and I'm going to show you a picture as to why. They start out with a ring at the birth, and then they add rings as the individual gets older. According to legend, this has been going on in this tribe for over 1,000 years. No one's exactly sure why. It's not like the women are considered more attractive if they have rings on their necks. It is just something that has become a tradition in the Padang tribe, and they're on the border of Thailand and Myanmar in northern Thailand. And as you can see, they have long necks. The reality is what they're doing is they're crushing the clavicle. They're pushing the clavicle down. This X-ray on the right shows you what's going on. They're pushing the clavicle down, and they're also compressing the top of the rib cage. And here are the ribs right here. This is a normal neck. This is what everybody's neck looks like. And they're stretching out the ligaments. They're stretching out the vertebra, as you can see plainly. This is a normal female neck, and this is a neck from one of the Padang women. And as you can see, they have compressed her ribs, and they have pushed her clavicle way down. So they're not really elongating the neck, as it were. Among the Mersey in Ethiopia, women stretch their lower lips by inserting progressively larger ceramic discs in a hole that has been cut through their lip. And this is what it looks like if the lady doesn't have her disc in, and this is what it looks like when she puts the disc in. I had a nephew that did this with his earlobe for some reason, and he had earlobes that almost touched his shoulders. Eventually, he decided, well, I don't think I want to do that anymore. And strangely, and as I thought it was kind of odd, his earlobe actually healed itself, and it contracted and went back to a normal earlobe. The hole's still there, kind of. You can find it, but he doesn't have the elongated earlobe anymore. Mentawai women from Indonesia file their teeth into sharp points so that they have smiles. Not that much different from a shark's, as you can see. It is considered quite beautiful for these individuals to have filed teeth. The Ainu women of northern Japan often tattoo their faces in what looks like a mustache around their lips. The Ainu are actually not Asian. They're white. As weird as that may seem, they live in northern Japan. They were the indigenous peoples living in Japan before a group of individuals from the Asian mainland, the Chinese, came over and became the Japanese. And of course, the Japanese have evolved differently than the Chinese have. And if you look at Chinese and Japanese, you can tell the difference between them fairly readily if you're in that area and you understand what you're looking at. Western women darken their eyelashes with mascara, trim their eyebrows, and paint their lips with lipstick. As you can see, the lady, well, both ladies in these pictures. That's a picture of me with one of my former students from Ashford. She jokingly said that she wanted to be my fourth wife. As you can see, she puts posts in her cheeks to pull her cheeks in. She has a lot. She wears a lot of. She wore a lot of makeup. She probably doesn't anymore. She just had a baby not very long ago. Uh, it's only about 3 or 4 months old. Should be interesting to find out what's going on with her, but I haven't. I've been so busy that I haven't been able to communicate with her. Anyway, that's her. She's not my fourth wife. I still have my third wife. So, and as you can see, she does a lot of things to her face, and it was quite attractive. I couldn't quite understand the pose through her cheeks that pulled her cheeks in, but that's what she wanted, I guess. I have several pictures of the two of us together. Not exactly. So I'm a lot uglier than she is. That's for damn sure. What kinds of faces are thought to be attractive? There seems to be a striking agreement around the world. Skin that looks free of blemishes, blotches, sores, and rashes is viewed as more attractive than skin that does not. And of course, they first discovered, or they first thought about researching this in 1951, Ford and Beach, and then in 1986 they did the same, a very similar survey, and they found exactly the same thing. People care so much about their skin because people tend to be attracted to healthy mates who would likely produce healthy offspring that would survive. And of course, that's what we're hoping for, is survivable offspring. People usually don't think about selecting healthy mates, but their unconscious preferences for traits that are associated with health have been guided by natural selection. So healthy skin, we find healthy skin attractive. We find healthy hair attractive. Responding to the apparent health of the skin could thus be a useful heuristic for sizing up the health of one's potential mate in the ancestral environment. A second characteristic that appears to be universally viewed as attractive is bilateral symmetry. We are most attracted to people whose left sides of their faces and bodies look identical to their right sides. And of course, this is an individual. This is an individual who. This is what he looks like. Oh no, They put the two halves of his face together. So one's two lefts and one's two rights, and that's what he looks like. Is he symmetrical? That's a good question. You'll have to come up with that yourself. Bilateral symmetry is an indicator of developmental stability. Given ideal growing conditions, and organisms' right and left sides will develop identically. And of course, this is the original. This is a left symmetry for this young lady, and this is a right symmetry. And as you can see, there's very little difference between the left and the right. She doesn't look that much different. This is Brad Pitt, of course. This is what Brad Pitt looks like. This is what Brad Pitt's two left sides look like, and this is what Brad Pitt's two right sides look like. As you can see, they're all quite similar. There is evidence that people prefer symmetrical faces more than asymmetrical ones, and it has been found in all cultures studied. The preference for symmetry is even stronger in hunting-gathering populations, such as the Hadza of Tanzania, and this is what the Hadza look like from Tanzania. Third characteristic of attractive faces is that they tend to be average. Facial features that are close to average in size and in configuration are perceived as most attractive. Men tend to prefer youthful features in women, a characteristic called neoteny. So what is neoteny? Neoteny is large eyes, pointed chin, small mouth, and high cheekbones. Those are the characteristics of a child. Neoteny is Latin for extended juvenile. In other words, the idea is that this individual looks like a young person for all their lives. This may be one of the reasons why Uh, Men find slender women attractive because as women are going through their puberty, they become tall and slender, and that shows youth. And so neoteny is one of the things that men are looking for in women. They're looking for they're looking for somebody that looks young. Women prefer some masculine features in men. One of the masculine features is their chins. And this is one of the reasons why men grow beards. They grow beards so that their chin looks more prominent. If it looks more prominent, then they look more masculine. And this is one of the reasons why men wear facial hair. Not too much facial hair. Too much facial hair makes them look a little, it kind of skews everything. These are, of course, men with man buns. That's the only way I found this picture. They're all stars of one ilk or another. I don't recognize everybody. This is Orlando Bloom, and that's Leonardo DiCaprio, and that's Jake Gyllenhaal. That's one of the Hemsworth brothers. Not sure who those two guys are. This guy was in the remake of Total Recall, but I don't remember his name. People with average sized features are less likely to have genetic abnormalities than people with deviant features. Humans can quickly process something that resembles a prototype, and quick processing is associated with good feelings and feelings of attraction. So as you look at these different pictures, you can see what women look like in Samoa, in African Americans, people of African descent in the United States. This is an actual person from Africa. This is an Ethiopian. They're taller and slender, more slender than other Africans. This is a lady from India. This is a lady from Japan. This is a lady from Peru. This is a lady from Uzbekistan. And this is a lady from Sweden. And here we have men from all those different places. African American male, the Philippines. This guy's from the Czech Republic. This guy's from Hungary. These two places are right next to each other. And as you can see, there are differences in the way that they look. This guy's Italian. This guy's is from China. This is a white American. And there's a man from Uzbekistan. When researchers started mixing the facial features of different racial groups, they discovered that people found the results more attractive than the pure racial groups. The opposite sex found the faces of Eurasian and biracial faces most attractive of all. And of course, this is the young lady this is Halle Berry. Halle Berry's mother is Italian and her father is African American. And as you can see, a mixture of the features has made one of the most attractive women on Earth. This young lady is of Asian and European descent. Some of the most beautiful women that I've ever met I saw over in Southeast Asia. What happened there, it was French Indochina before, so there were a lot of Frenchmen that went over there. They reproduced with the Vietnamese women, and they created what we refer to as Eurasian women. And of course, this young lady is of Eurasian descent. And as you can see, she's quite attractive. I don't remember what her name is, but her mother is Asian, and her father is American. Is a white American, a European American. This is Shamar Moore. And this is Keanu Reeves. Shamar Moore, his father is African American and his mother is French Canadian. And so as you can see, a mixture of the two races makes for I don't know, more attractive features. This is Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves, his father was Chinese, Portuguese, and native Hawaiian. And his mother was English. And as you can see, it's a mixture of all those races, or all those groups has given him a very distinctive face. A little more distinctive than other individuals. It is not certain why multiracial faces are perceived as attractive. One account is that people should be attracted to genetic diversity as a marker of healthy genes. Multiracial represents the best average of all the faces the individual has encountered in their lives. So this is the same lady we saw on the other page. And that may be her as well. I'm not exactly sure who it is. It's probably somebody famous, and you guys are going to send me an email and scream at me. Well, how could you not recognize that lady? She's one of the most famous women in the world. Anyway, multiracial represents the best of averages. Of course, I find this really kind of fascinating because here we're dealing, on the Navajo reservation, we're dealing with people that tell you that you shouldn't find a significant other, a spouse. You shouldn't reproduce with anybody unless they're other Navajos. And of course, worldwide, this is not what is happening or what has happened. If you go to some place like England, England was invaded by just like everybody and their cousin. They were invaded by initially they were invaded by Germanic tribes. They were Celts and Gaels originally, so they were Gaelic, and the Gaels, of course. So they were very pale individuals. Then they were invaded by German tribes, the Anglos and Angles and the Saxons. Eventually, they were invaded by the Romans, and then they were invaded by Norsemen, by the Vikings, and then they were invaded by a group of Vikings who had become French. So they were invaded by the Normans, who were Vikings who had become French. If you look at somebody from England, they're all mixed up. Most Germans are mixed with Swedes. They're mixed with Polish people. They've been invaded they were invaded by the Romans. I mean, everybody and their cousin has left babies on the doorstep all over Europe. So talking about pure Aryan whatever is kind of silly because that doesn't exist. There are no pure European races. It's just not something that has happened. The Spanish were invaded by the Moors. The Moors were North Africans. The Italians went all over the place because they were the Romans, and of course they invaded up into Germany, up into France. They invaded England. So I mean, everybody's been just about everywhere. The attractiveness of average features does not seem to generalize well to perceptions of bodies. Does not seem to be true that people are most attracted to those of average weight, height, and muscle mass, breast, and hips. Of course, the reality of the Navajo reservation is that initially, if I understand correctly, and you guys can go ahead and tell Dr. Garrity that I'm saying stupid things about your people. But if I understand correctly, the Navajo tribe started with four clans. And from those four clans, they created, other clans that were created like the Nakai. Nakai means Mexican. So, when they started interacting or interbreeding with people of Mexican descent, they created a new clan. I have a friend who is, one of his clans is the Hamas people. The Hamas people were a Puebloan tribe north of Santa Fe, and when after the Long Walk, after the Dene people were allowed to go back to their reservation, a group of individuals went up to the Hamas Pueblo, and they were housed there for a number of years. And so when they left, they took some wives with them. I am assuming some of the young ladies had given birth to babies from the Hamas men, and that became another clan. So the reality is that I think you have 124 clans now, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of that has to do with accepting other groups into your into your tribe. It's kind of interesting that Sarah, when she was here, she was in class with Wilson one night, and he said, you know, Navajos should never marry outside of the Navajo tribe. And of course, she's married to a Navajo, and she was quite offended. Uh, so I don't know. You do whatever you want. Marry whoever the hell you want to marry. I don't care. If you want to stay whatever pure or whatever, then go ahead and do it. But it looks like there has been mixing over time. I don't know why you stopped in integrating people into the tribe, but I guess it's stopped now. The kinds of bodies that tend to be seen as most attractive are often those that depart considerably from the average. Of course, most men do not look like either of these guys. Well, anyway, and most women certainly don't look like that. There's those legs are really, really a lot longer than they should be. Most women don't have legs like that, and most men don't have bodies and chests like that, torsos and arms and whatnot. In West Africa, the term fat is often viewed as complimentary, indicating strength and beauty. This is according to research by Cassidy in 1991. Within the United States, African Americans have heavier ideal body weights than European Americans, and they feel less social pressure toward thinness. And this happened because sometimes the individuals that survived the trip from Africa to the United States, and sometimes this took 5-6 weeks to get from Africa to the New World. The only people that were able to survive, were larger people with more body fat. And for that reason, some African Americans have a lot more fat than others. But we just saw an African American back here who is very slender. And I don't know how slender he is. They come from different groups. I mean, the reality is that they didn't just take Africans from select areas in Africa. They took Africans from all over Africa, anybody they could catch, anybody that they could capture. The reality is that the people doing the capturing were other Africans. Sometimes what would happen in the slave trade, an individual, a chief would go into an area, he would conquer those people, and then he would sell them into slavery. So sometimes whole groups of individuals, whole villages of individuals were captured and sent to the New World. Most of these were African Muslim traders, and they traded them out off of the Gold Coast in Africa. And they came from all over, like I said, they came from all over Africa. Where was I? Okay. Another aspect of interpersonal attraction is the propinquity effect. People are more likely to become friends with people with whom they frequently interact. So if you're a pen pal for somebody, then probably you're not going to fall in love with that individual. The reason is because you're not close to them. Of course, now that we have people that are dating online, of course, they feel like they're close to somebody because they talk to them, they write them questions, the other person answers them back, and they get a feeling that they are close to that individual. But in the old days, before we had all the social media, uh, what had to happen was you fell in love with somebody that you were close to, somebody that you could touch. Researchers looked at friendship patterns that developed in police academy. The simple fact of who stood next to whom was more important in influencing police recruits' selection of friends than their personalities, their backgrounds, and religious beliefs. As weird as that sounds, so it's the guy that stands beside you. Now this is a confession, I guess. I married the girl that sat beside me in driver's education. My last name is Bradway, and her last name is Bonowit. And Bonowit, of course, we sat right next to each other. The reason we sat right next to each other was because they arranged this in alphabetical order. If my name had been Johnson, if my name had been Ramsey, then I would never have sat beside her, and we probably would never have gotten married. As weird as that sounds. So it's kind of the same thing. This is the propinquity effect. If I never sat next to her, I never would have talked to her. Probably never would have talked to her. And we may never have developed a relationship and then eventually gotten married. One reason that the propinquity effect works is because of a phenomenon known as the mere exposure effect, and that's exactly what happened with the two of us. She was actually dating a friend of mine. I think she was. She was dating a friend of mine, and we talked a lot, and she liked talking to me, and I liked talking to her. Despite the fact she was dating my friend, the only reason she was dating my friend was because they went to the same lake. Indiana has a bunch of lakes in the northern part of the state, and they went to the same lake, and the propinquity effect again. They were the only two. They were the only two people of about the same age, and so they kind of started dating because of that. As weird as that sounds. The more we are exposed to a stimulus, the more that we are attracted to it. That's me talking to the person sitting right next to me. This has been shown to be true for attraction to other people, foreign words, music, and a variety of inanimate stimuli. So the reality is that the more you come in contact with something, the more you get used to it, and the more you get used to it, the more you want to interact with it, whether it's words or people or whatever. Last week I was answering somebody's discussion, and I answered half of it was in Spanish. I took Spanish in high school and college. I don't really speak Spanish, but I understand it, and some of those words just creep into my vocabulary. The same way with since I was up on the Fort Belknap Reservation for 10 years, some of their words have creeped into my vocabulary. I don't usually use them down here, and it's the same way with Navajo. I'm sure that Ate, I don't say it right, but I'm sure that word, I'll start saying that to people when I say hello to people eventually. The mere exposure effect appears to be a cultural universal. Japanese and Americans appear to be equally likely to come to like those people with whom they interact most frequently. And this is according to Heine, who is your author, and Renshaw in a study done in 2002. Why in the world did he do Japanese and Americans? Because his wife is Japanese. And he first started his journey into studying cultural psychology when he was teaching English in Japan. People tend to be attracted to those who are most like themselves, and this is known as Similarity Attraction effect. I told you about my own ancestry. It seems like the only ancestry I have is German, English, and French, and Belgian. So it's people that look like us. I mean, we all look alike. It's kind of odd that we don't have any we're not mixed with any other groups, not even any Southern Europeans or Eastern Europeans or Northern Europeans. My wife right now, her grandmother is from Slovenia. It's the same place Melania Trump is from, oddly, but so she has Slovenian blood in her. So she has Eastern European, and she's primarily the same. I mean, it was most of her ancestry is English and Irish and Eastern or Western European, and except for the Slovenian, of course, as weird as that is. Much research has shown that people are more likely to view someone as attractive either as a potential friend or romantic partner if both are similar in their attitudes, their economic background, their personality, their religion, their social background, and activities. And strangely, and not, I guess it's not that strange, but I've had problems finding romantic partners because of my religion. I don't have one, and there's a lot of people out there that will not have anything to do with anyone unless they are God-fearing. Yeah, that's the word for it, God-fearing. So I've met people who I clicked with. We started interacting more and more, and eventually they dumped me because of my lack of religion. Research that sought to determine whether North Americans or Japanese liked similar or dissimilar strangers showed that North Americans had a stronger attraction to similar strangers than Japanese. In some studies, Japanese show a similarity attraction effect as well, but it is consistently weaker than the North American effect. Now, the reality is in North America, there are a lot of different people. In Japan, there are only Japanese people, almost exclusively. So the Japanese people, their friends and all their friends and all their enemies are exactly like them. So of course that may have something to do with this. They don't have. There is another group in Japan. It's the Koreans. They represent between 3 and 5% of the population. But just about everybody else in Japan is Japanese, and for that reason, of course, if you're looking for friends, then all your friends the probability of finding a Korean friend is fairly remote. And if you're looking for an enemy, the being able to find anybody but other Japanese is fairly remote. Researchers have discovered that the most frequent topic of conversation is gossip about other people. Studies that track people's happiness over time find that their happiest times are when they are with others. People's most emotionally wrenching experiences involve the breakup of relationships and the death of loved ones. Communal sharing, the members of a group emphasize their common identity rather than consider their idiosyncrasies. In communal sharing, every person is treated the same. Each has the identical rights and privileges as every other member of their group. The ideal in communal sharing is equality among all the members of the group. Everybody shares equally. And that would be what happens on teams. You've got everybody on a team is equal, and that's supposed to be the idea. So your teammates, no matter whether they play third base or shortstop or first base, or they're catchers, or they're one of the substitutes, they're all equal, and that's what happens on teams. Hopefully, if you play on a team, there is no authority ranking on the team. Authority ranking involves the inequality of relationships that people share. Within authority ranking relationships, people are linearly ordered along a hierarchical social dimension. People with higher ranking have prestige and privileges that those with lower ranking do not have. Subordinates are often entitled to perceived protection and care from those above, but you got to pay for it. The lower ranking members earn less money, they're allowed fewer privileges, and are obliged to follow the orders of those above them. Asymmetry underlies all authority ranked relationships. Now this is really kind of interesting because in authority ranking, you have people that are in charge, and you have people that are subordinates. Now, the interesting thing, if we look at the two political parties, one party supports tax breaks for the very wealthy. The other party supports tax breaks for everybody, for especially for poorer people, because they have less money, obviously. It's really kind of interesting that right now we have a very authority based administration that's in power, and because of that, of course, he decided that he was going to bring in all these wonderful people. They were all millionaires and billionaires, as weird as that sounds. Even the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, her husband owns an education company, strangely enough, that makes billions and billions of dollars. Another basic rationale, a relational structure, is equality matching, based on the idea of balance and reciprocity. People keep track of what is exchanged in equivalent terms. Hi, you're my buddy. I'm going to pay for dinner tonight, but you'll pay for it sometime in the future. Reciprocity, balance and reciprocity. While equality matching is probably the least familiar relational structure to Westerners, it is quite common in many cultures around the world. For example, exchanging Christmas cards, taking turns, exchanging dinner invitations, carpooling. These are things that we do in the United States. We take turns. If we went to Europe, the English are big on making lines and everybody taking their turn. When I was stationed in Germany, one of the fascinating things that I found was the Germans don't do that. They don't make lines and they don't take turns. Germans always want to be first. So I remember we were at a skating rink, and skating was over. The time was out. They were going to close the rink, so everybody got off the ice and everybody took off their skates, and everybody went to turn in their skates at the counter, and instead of everybody lining up and making an orderly line, of course, especially the Germans, the Americans are standing back going, "What the hell's going on?" But the Germans they were trying to get him to take their stuff. They were hitting the guy with their skates, which is kind of dangerous. And of course, he was swearing at them in German because he was a German guy. But it was really kind of fascinating because the Americans were the last ones to get out of there, because they were afraid to get in or to get into that melee with the German kids. It's really kind of fascinating. I was on a flight. I was on a flight from Tokyo, Japan to Seoul, Korea. It was a KAL flight, and they announced that they were going to land, and that everybody needed to fasten their seat belts, and so. And everybody did, of course. I mean, they're not supposed to land with people standing up. So they landed, and as soon as the wheels touched the ground, the Koreans jumped up, unfastened their seatbelts, jumped up, grabbed their luggage, and crowded up to the front of the airplane. It was just the most bizarre thing in the world. It was kind of spooky. They had to be first. I have no idea what their rationale was, but it was really fascinating. They needed to be first. And of course, I waited until everybody was gone. Now, the interesting thing was I hadn't seen my wife in 6 months. And of course, she's standing waiting for me to get off the airplane inside the terminal. And I was one of the last ones to get off the airplane because I got crowded out by like everybody. Nobody takes turns in Japan. But if you take a flight in the United States, everybody takes turns. Everybody gets out by their seat, but not in Korea. It's It's a free-for-all. Market pricing is another type of relational structure. All features of benefits that are exchanged can be reduced to a single underlying dimension, usually money. People expect to ultimately receive something equivalent to what they have given. And that is market pricing as far as relationships are concerned. And this is one of the reasons why if a man buys a woman dinner and or he gives her a gift, he assumes that he's going to get something in return, and that something usually is sex. People normally feel some degree of freedom to move openly between relationships, and this is known as relational mobility. Some people have a high relational mobility. They feel that they aren't bound by old relationships and are able to start new ones at will. What is that relationship I was just thinking? So if you've heard the stories of Donald Trump, Melania gave birth to Barron about 10 years ago, and while she was giving birth, Donald Trump was having an affair with one of either McDonald or the stripper. I can't remember. Relational mobility. So as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he has high relational mobility. I'm sure you heard the videotape of what he said. Well, when he said that, he was married to Melania Trump. So here he is. He's talking about grabbing other women by their sexual parts, and he's married to somebody. Admitting that you would do something like that is a sign of high relational mobility, where the individual is not bound by any relationship that he really has. Other people feel more restricted in their relationships. They have low relational mobility. Their commitments and obligations to their old relationships are so great that they are controlled by them, and they don't feel the freedom to form new relationships. They view relationships as stable and lifelong, that provide both benefits and costs in order to maintain them. This is the way it primarily, well, I don't know if it's the way it primarily is in the United States. Seems to be a lot of messing around going on. So there are some individuals that have high relational mobility, where they think that they can do whatever they want with anybody they want. And then there are other individuals with low relational mobility who are committed to people most of their lives. Relationships in low relational mobility situations are not always positive. Some people really don't get along with each other. If it is not an option to decide that they will not engage with one another, they will continue to have a relationship, though it might be fraught with negative feelings. And of course, this may be, I hope this isn't the case as far as you are concerned with your in-laws. I've never been lucky as far as in-laws were concerned. I think possibly women were attracted to me because I was maybe a father figure. All three of my wives have had bad relationships with their mothers. So I'm not sure what that has to do with anything, but I've never gotten along with any of my mother-in-laws, as strange as that may seem. And neither did my wives. I'm like an experiment. The average American adult reports having a network of 20.76 friends. These are the people that you interact with on a fairly frequent basis. You can think of your friends in high school probably. How many relatively close friends did you have in high school? If it was around 21, then you're an American. Congratulations. The average adult in Hong Kong has a network of 13.23 friends, and that is in Hong Kong. The average German adult has a network of 12.75 friends. A common reaction heard among people, many international people, are after their first encounters with Americans, is how friendly they seem. Compared with people from other cultures, Americans have a rather casual attitude toward forming friendships. It's okay. I have friends all over the world. And the reason I have friends all over the world is because I like everybody. But other cultures don't do that. They don't form friendships like that. I have friends who are Hispanic. I have friends who are Asian. I have friends who are African American. I lived in an African American community when I lived in D.C., and I had friends all along my walk who would talk to me. I've had friends who I've lived in Hispanic communities. I've lived on Indian reservations up here and down there, and I seem to have friends wherever I go. And I'm fairly casual about forming my friendships. In collectivistic contexts, an important aspect of friendship is to provide each other with advice, and this advice is frequently offered regardless of whether one's friends wants to receive it. Unsolicited advice is common in a variety of collectivistic cultures, such as Turkey and Colombia, for example. It seems to be especially prevalent in Russia. We're going to talk about Russia. The Russians are fascinating people. They have a totally different culture than most Europeans. Part of Russia is actually in Europe, but the rest of Russia is in Asia. And this whole bifurcation between Asia and Europe seems to have given them a really interesting personality. According to BBC journalist James Rogers, you can't really say mind your own business in Russian. You can translate the phrase literally, but the concept is not well understood. Russians will tell you what the hell they think. They will give you advice. A study by Chinsova, Dutton, and Vaughn in 2012, looking at unsolicited advice among Americans and Russians, found that Russians were twice as likely to have given unsolicited advice. The amount of advice given by Americans was more likely to be contingent on whether it was requested. The amount of advice given by Russians was unaffected by whether or not it was requested. The Russians don't care. If they think something should happen, they will tell you about it. In Russia, a big part of friendship seems to be to let your friends know how you think they should be leading their lives differently. This is common in Russia. It's for people to tell people what they think they should be doing. When Ghanaians and Americans were asked whether having a lot of friends was good, Ghanaians said that it was foolish to have a lot of friends. Friendship to Ghanaians involves obligations, both financial and social. Thus, too many friends could make you a pauper with no control over your life. So the more friends you have, the less control you have over your life. Research conducted with Westerners has shown that physically attractive people have a number of more positive life outcomes than those that are less physically attractive. And these outcomes extend across a broad array of domains in ways that may seem patently unfair. These are the same women. This is America. I can't remember her name. Anyway, she was on Ugly Betty, and this is her on Ugly Betty, and this is her when she's not uglied up for Betty. Her role is Betty. Essays that are believed to have been written by an attractive author, are evaluated more positively than ones believed to have been written by a less attractive author. As weird as that sounds, this is one of the reasons I don't even want to know if I'm reading an article or if I'm reading a paper by a male or a female. I know that potentially I will give somebody an advantage if they're female than if they're male. I'll be meaner to the men than I will be to the females. So that's one of the reasons why I use your first initial instead of your first name. There are a lot of duplicates, a lot of people with the last name of Yazzie, a lot of people with the last name of Begay. And for that reason, I just use your first initial. And so when I return something to you, it will have your first initial and then your last name, something that you've written. And that's the reason I do it, because I know that instructors have a proclivity for giving better grades to more attractive people. I'm sorry, I find women more attractive than men. This is the same individual as well. I can't remember. She was in The Wedding Planner. I can't remember. Anyway. She's, as you can see, over here she's all dolled up, and over here she's not looking so attractive. Attractive politicians get more votes than unattractive ones. So what am I saying? Am I saying that Hillary Clinton is more attractive than that Donald Trump is more attractive than Hillary Clinton? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The female, she won the popular vote by about a little less than 3 million votes, about 2.8 million votes. So Donald Trump got less votes than Hillary Clinton did, but he won because of the electoral college. Attractive children are rated as smarter and better behaved by their teachers. So as you look at these kids, and they all look fairly attractive to me. I'm not exactly sure which one would be considered unattractive by her teachers, but if you had a whole classroom full of kids and they were of different races, if the teacher found white children as grossly unattractive, or they have too big, their ears are too big, or their hair is too pale, then potentially she would be prejudiced against those select individuals. And of course, I'm saying like the white kids are going to be the ones that are being prejudiced against, but the reality is it's usually a minority that is being picked on by the teacher, or being thought of as not as bright, as more disruptive. Attractive MBA grads earn more money than less attractive MBA grads, and this is by research done by Freese, Olson, and Russell in 1991. I'm not going to tell you which one of these two is more attractive than the other, but I can bet you that one of them will get a job before the other one will. Attractive criminals get lighter sentences than less attractive criminals. This is research done by Stewart in 1980. You may find all of these guys just butt-face ugly, but not all criminals look like these guys. From an early age, we learn that attractive people have more desirable characteristics than unattractive ones, such as when we learn of Cinderella's kindness and beauty in contrast to her evil and ugly stepsisters. And of course, here we are. The ugly stepsisters are tearing her dress apart over and over and over again. Oh, let's change the picture. Some people refer to this as the tyranny of the beautiful, and it has been explained by our ability to discern beauty almost immediately after meeting someone. We will often assume that they have other positive features as well, and this is known as the halo effect. These are two men. One of them was an actor, and the other one is a model. However, when this picture was taken, this individual was in jail, and nobody had ever met this guy before. This picture was put on a website showing all the inmates in Modesta, California. And when this picture was published, the women went crazy over it. They found him to be one of the most beautiful men that they had ever seen. Could it be because he's an African American with gray blue eyes? Could it be his tattoos? Could it be the scar over his left eye? Could it be the fact that he's killed somebody because of this teardrop right here? If we want to talk about killing people, this is the most highly decorated. This is Audie Murphy. He was the most highly decorated soldier during World War II. As you can see, he's a fairly attractive young man. One of the interesting things about Audie Murphy was that he was only 5'5". He's not a very tall man, but as you can see, he's a fairly attractive man. And here is Audie Murphy with all of his medals. Well, not all. Actually, these aren't all of his medals. This is his Congressional Medal of Honor that he won. He was in a battle in France, and they were being attacked by Germans. And his men were being killed, and he jumped up on the back of a tank destroyer, and there was a 50 caliber machine gun up there, and he started pumping away with the 50 caliber machine gun. He destroyed one tank with his machine gun. And fought off 6 others. He was attacked by a whole company of Germans, and he was able to fight them off. And that's the reason he won the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was trying to save his men. Later, he got them to the Germans to stop, and then he organized his men and fought a counterattack, despite the fact had been wounded in the leg and the buttocks, and he still attacked them. This guy after he got out of prison. After they saw his picture, an individual saw him and said he was the most beautiful man in the world. He had women from everywhere that were, especially California, who were proposing marriage, or they were proposing just sex, I guess. Oddly enough, he was a gang member when he was young. His name is Jeremy Meeks. He is referred to as either the handsome jailbird or the hot felon. That's what they call him. You can see all of his interesting tattoos. He was a member of the Northside Gangster Crips. So he was a Crip as compared to the Bloods, Crips and Bloods. Anyway, there he is. And the reason he may be considered so attractive is because of his eyes. The individual that he was modeling for, he has a relationship with the guy's daughter. He's a billionaire, and this guy just kind of came in, and the daughter fell in love with his EBK tattoo on his stomach, and she had a baby with him. The last I heard, it just kind of fascinates me. All this stuff fascinates me. Anyway, he's Jeremy Meeks. So potentially we'll be hearing more of Jeremy Meeks. Audie Murphy died in an airplane crash in 1971. He was an actor. He made over 40 movies. Most of them were Westerns, so you can see him in Westerns. Kind of a fascinating person. And as you can see, he has a baby face. The other thing to remember about Audie Murphy was he was the first person to warn the United States military about PTSD. He died in 1971, and that was at the apex of the Vietnam War. And he himself was suffering from PTSD. His wives, he was married twice. Both of his wives said that he never went to bed without a loaded pistol under his pillow because of what he had been through during World War II. People from Ghana and the United States were asked whether they were happy with their lives. Attractive Americans were more satisfied with their lives than unattractive ones. However, attractive Ghanaians were less satisfied with their lives than attractive Ghanaians. Beauty is a commodity in the United States, but it is not in Ghana. They don't see beauty as a positive attribute. In the United States, if somebody is attractive, you assume that they're nice and pleasant and happy. But in Ghana, of course, beauty has nothing to do with any of that. Oishi, Ishii, and Loon in 2009 studied American college students, comparing those who had lived in one place and those who had moved multiple times. The movers had more conditional loyalty, they had more Facebook friends on campus, they recognized their personality traits as part of their identity, and they preferred chain stores. Now this is really kind of interesting because I raised my kids in the military. I joined the military in 1971. My son was born in 1972. I was in the service for 12 years. So for the first 12 years of his life, he was stationed with me wherever I was. First place I was stationed with him was Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. Then we moved to Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patt Air Force Base. Then we moved to Lubbock, Texas, and I was in Lubbock for 7 years. Then we moved to Germany. We moved to I was stationed at Ramstein. My wife was stationed at Zweibrücken. Then we were stationed at Offutt Air Force Base, and that's where I got out of the service at Offutt Air Force Base. But my poor son didn't know anything but military life for his first 12 years. My daughter was born in 1969. I joined the service in 1971. So for the first 2 years of her life, she was around friends and family. She was around family. And then, like I said, I joined the service in 1971 in October. So she was 2 years old, and my wife was pregnant with my son. So my two kids moved around for 12 years. Both of them did. And they developed really interesting personalities. Both of them, I would say, are somewhat introverted, but both of them can get along in a social situation. And of course, that's the only way that you can survive in the military, is by making friends fast. When you move every 2 or 3 years. We were stationed in Germany for 3 years. We were stationed in Texas for 7. We were stationed at Offutt. Actually, we stayed at Offutt. I stayed at Offutt in the Omaha area to raise my kids. But they made friends very rapidly. One of the reasons they made friends so rapidly is because they were both athletes, and of course, that's an easy way to make friends of the people on your team, especially if you're one of the best, the fastest runners, or the best people on your team. And that happened because they started playing soccer in Texas, and then we went to Germany. Of course, soccer is king in Germany, so they played a lot of soccer in Germany. We were there for 3 years. And then when we came back to the States, they were a leg up on just about everybody their age because of their experience playing soccer in Germany. Okay. Cities that tend to have a great deal of mobility, such as San Diego, Los Angeles, and Atlanta, have more fair weather sports fans, higher crime rates with less pro-community action, more large national chain stores. This itinerant lifestyle may make the United States culture very much different from other places. Fair weather sports fans? When we were in California. My wife is stationed at March Air Force Base in Riverside, California. My daughter played high school basketball. It was really kind of weird because sometimes we would be the only fans in the stands. There were so many sports going on in California that hardly anybody attended anything. And this is one of the reasons why the Los Angeles Rams moved to St. Louis, because they weren't filling the stadium every weekend. It's one of the reasons why the Chargers have moved north. Actually, the Chargers moved north probably more for money than anything else. But the reality is that they really didn't have a very good fan base because people in San Diego are transients. They are people that come from someplace else. Same way with Los Angeles. Hardly anybody in Los Angeles comes from Los Angeles. They're not native Angelinos. If you look at the actors that moved or that have been famous, hardly any of them were actually born in California. A lot of them were born someplace else, and their family moved to that area for one reason or another. Sometimes it was so that their kids could become actors. So there's a lot of movement going on, especially in San Diego and Los Angeles. When we were in Riverside, California, there was a movement in California that people who had actually been born there were putting stickers in their cars, native Californian, in their cars, and you saw these every once in a while, but not all that often. But there was this really interesting prejudice against people who were just coming in. When I first got there, I was a laboratory technician and a teacher. And when I first got there, I couldn't find a job as either a laboratory technician or a teacher because in California, you have to have a California license. A national license isn't any good as far as California is concerned. You have to have a California license. And the test for to be a teacher in California is only given once a year. And of course, that kind of messes up people who are military. I came in, it was like it had been given a week before I got there, so I wasn't able to take the test. The test also cost at the time $110, which was kind of interesting. Anyway, that's just a way to keep outsiders outside, I guess. In many Latin American cultures, people place an emphasis on maintaining harmonious relationships and on making expressive displays of graciousness, hospitality, and personal harmony. This is known as simpatico, and this is one of the reasons why Hispanics are such happy people. They have lower stress levels than anybody else, and part of it has to do with this cultural idea that they need to be gracious, they need to be hospitable, and they need to be harmonious. Latin Americans view their self-concepts to be more characterized by traits that reflect simpatico, such as easygoing, respectful, courteous, and agreeable. Latin Americans also expect interactions with others to be dominated by positive social behaviors and to have fewer negative social behaviors compared with the expectations of European Americans. Latin Americans show a clear preference for working in groups in which people strive to maintain a warm and hospitable atmosphere. European Americans, especially Protestants, show a clear preference for staying focused on the task at hand. Really kind of interesting if you've ever worked with somebody who was Hispanic. If you're working away, a lot of times they'll come to your office and they'll want to talk to you, and they will sit down for hours talking to you. Of course, being a European and coming from a Protestant background, I want to get the job done, and of course, this is one of those interesting balancing acts that has to take place when you're working with somebody who's Hispanic. Latin Americans act in more sociable ways than European Americans, and time sampling studies find that they spend greater proportion of their time socializing with others. This is one of the aspects of being Hispanic. Humans require such an extended period of costly protective care and socialization that they fare best when they have two parents devoted to providing resources and socializing them. In the ancestral environment, it was likely that parents who did not feel especially strong love for their children were less likely to have their children survive the tenuous circumstance of a subsistence lifestyle. Some strong incentives were needed to keep the parents together so they would both remain to support the children. According to the reasoning, romantic love was selected as the glue that keeps couples together. Those people who did not develop feelings of love for their partners would have been less likely to stay with them and would have ended up having fewer surviving offspring than those who felt strong feelings of love. One review of ethnographies of 166 cultures found clear evidence of romantic love in 89% of the cultures. Historically, the majority of marriages around the world have been arranged by families rather than by couples themselves. And of course, this is traditional as far as the Dene people are concerned. Wilson is constantly telling the story about how he met his wife and the fact that they have an arranged marriage. And of course, they're still together. Looking at 186 societies, researchers found that Western strategies in finding an appropriate spouse was only seen among 31% of men and 8% of women. In a study by Levine, Sato, Hashimoto, and Verma in 1995, college students from several countries were asked the question, if a man or woman, depending on your gender, had all the qualities you desired, would you marry this person if you were not in love with them? Half of the students from India and Pakistan said they would marry the person, and 1/4 more were undecided. So that's three-fourths of the individuals said that they would marry the person if they were. This is from India and Pakistan. They would marry the person if they had all the qualities that they were looking for. Over 80% of the Americans, Britons, Australians, and Latin Americans said they would not, and only a small percentage, less than 5%, of these countries said they would. So as far as India is concerned, yeah, sure, if they've got everything I'm looking for, 75% of them, yeah, it's a possibility that I will marry them. However, the English-speaking world and in the Spanish-speaking world, nope, and they're not going to marry somebody unless they fall in love. The identical question was posed to American college students in 1967. This is a marriage from 1967. I was married in 1969, graduated from high school in 1967. This is really fascinating to me because I'm not sure my first wife actually had very strong feelings for me. But that was common back then. At that time, 65% of the men, but only 24% of the women said they would not marry someone they did not love. So there you go. And this could be me, except I was in the Navy, of course. But that was in 1967. The likelihood of a culture favoring arranged marriage is not determined randomly. It appears to relate to the dominant kind of family structure in the culture. This is a picture of Donald Trump and his second wife. He is now married to his third wife, just like I'm married to my third wife. This is Marla Maples. Yeah, he does have a daughter with this individual. Three of his children were from his first marriage. He was married to a lady by the name of Ivanka. She was Eastern European. Yeah, she was from, I don't remember where she was from. Anyway, she was Eastern European. And he had 3 children with her. Don, Eric, and Ivanka are all from his first marriage. He has a daughter with her, and I don't remember what that lady's name is. Anyway, this is Marla Maples, his second wife. And of course, now he's married to Melania. Melania and he have one son who's named Baron. Good in 1959 proposed that romantic love would become more important in cultures as the strength of extended family ties became weaker. The powerful feelings of romantic love could be somewhat irrelevant or even problematic for marriages in cultures with strong extended family ties. So you don't marry the woman, you marry the family. As somebody who was in the military, I can tell you we visited family relatively infrequently, since we only had a month off a year. And usually we had to travel to get there. So it was real easy to stay away from my in-laws when I was in the military. The Western ideal of romantic love, characterized by intense feelings and mutual absorption, could be disruptive in cultures with large kin networks because such feelings can interfere with people's abilities to respect the wishes of their family members. And of course, this is when we're talking about networks of family, then a lot of times what you're talking about is relationships that are very, very much different. You're not married to the individual, you're married to her and her family. So you have to get along with everybody. So romantic love wouldn't be as important. If you're romantically in love with somebody, then potentially it might be difficult for you to interact with other people like that. Well, anyway. An analysis of data from 117 non-industrialized societies found clear support for Good's hypothesis, Lee and Stone in 1980. Marriages based on love were more likely in cultures with nuclear family structures than they were in cultures with extended families. Many arranged marriages start out with no feelings of love between the couple. However, in time, the husband and wife begin to develop strong feelings for one another. A good analogy is getting a pet and developing strong feelings for the animal the longer that you have it. Obviously, he loves his puppy. People in arranged marriages describe their experiences in a similar manner. The individual approaches a person as his or her new spouse with the expectation of eventually falling in love. With time, they usually do. And, well, I'm going to read that too. With the abysmal failure rate of Western marriages, the assumption that arranged marriages are miserable is probably inaccurate. Most people in countries where arranged marriages are prevalent view arranged marriages as more likely to succeed than romantic marriages. A survey among adults living in various urban centers in India found that 74% of men and women believed that arranged marriages were more likely to succeed than love marriages. And this is a study done in 1994 by Kishwar. There is also evidence that those in arranged marriages are at least as satisfied with their marriages as those in love marriages. Turkish couples in arranged marriages have been found to be as much in love with their partners as couples in love marriages. And that's according to a study in 1999 by Hortescue. Members of the Unification Church participated in mass arranged marriages where partners were chosen in ceremonies that involved thousands of men and women. Looking at marriages after 3 years, researchers found a similar rate of satisfaction between these couples and the general public, and that's according to a study done by Galanter in 1986. Men in Japanese arranged marriages were found to be more satisfied than those in love marriages, and that's research by Blood in 1967. Men in Chinese arranged marriages were as satisfied as those in arranged marriages. Research done by Zhu and White in 1990. However, women in Japanese arranged marriages were found to be less satisfied in arranged than love marriages, and that's according to Blood. So Blood found that men are happy about it, but women are not. Women in Chinese arranged marriages were found to be less satisfied in their marriages than love marriages, according to Zhu and White in 1990. This suggests that costs of arranged marriages are borne largely by women in the Japanese and Chinese cultures. And of course, the Japanese and Chinese cultures are male-dominated cultures. So it's more likely that the women are considered subordinate. So it's more likely that if the man is going to get physical with the woman, the society is going to overlook what he has done. A study by Gupta and Singh in 1982 compared marital satisfaction between Indian couples in arranged and love marriages. In the initial years of marriage, those in love marriages professed more love than those in arranged marriages. Over time, it was those in arranged marriages who reported having the most love. This pattern held true for both men and women. The study was replicated with similar results by Kumar and Dayani in 1996, Yelsma and Athapalli in 1988. While these results may seem counterintuitive, Heine explains them using an interview with a Japanese colleague who had been in an arranged marriage for 30 years. And that's a picture of your author, Heine. I don't remember his first name. There he is again. When they were first married, they had no love for each other. Now they have some love for each other. Some love seems like quite a bit compared to no love. Couples in love marriages typically start out with a lot of love for each other. Years later, it is not surprising that many of them report having less love than they did during their steamy courtship. Some love doesn't seem so great compared to a lot of love that they had for each other earlier. A study in Israel comparing arranged and love marriages found similar results.
Those in arranged marriages are found to be as much in love with their partners as couples in love marriages. And that's according to Shakar in 1991. And that is the end of the chapter. I'm sorry I ran over a little bit, but the reality is that we're done with the chapter. So this is the only lecture for the week. I'll see you next week. Stay safe, stay at home, have a good time, do all your work, and I'll talk to you next week.